Good morning. We've already had quite the experience of surrender between the music, the meditation, the reading. I'd like to share some stories today that can hopefully lead us deeper into what it means to surrender. How many of you have a favorite walking path in the woods or in a park that you like to frequent, or that you did at one point in your life? Yeah. So one of the most palpable experiences of surrender that I had was getting lost in a woods that was my favorite woods that I frequented all the time in Lansing. It was several years ago, and my friend Luis was visiting from Mexico. It had been several years since I'd seen him. We went to college together and we were spiritual buddies. And I was feeling a little bit anxious about reconnecting with him because since the time that had passed between our graduation and him moving back to Mexico, I had grown into a much more interfaith, interspiritual kind of person. And he was this sweet, mystical, devout Catholic. And I was a little bit worried about how the conversation might go. And so of the 3 walking paths that I could choose that day, I chose the shortest in case connections didn't go so well. But sure enough, we started walking and our kindred spirits just connected again. And it was a joy to hear what was unfolding in his life. And we talked about old times. And so I eventually merged just on to the longer walking path. And we were talking and walking, and it was a beautiful August night, a couple hours before sunset. And I didn't really notice when another hour had gone by, and we weren't quite at the trailhead yet. And I didn't say anything because Luis is kind of this, if you know Ayurveda, kind of pitta personality. We were a little anxious and, oh, why worry him? I've been in this park lots of times. I can get us out. It'll be fine. And then we circle around again another hour only to come back to the same place. And now I'm starting to get worried because sun is setting and it is darker and we're both dressed in summer attire. And so I mentioned something to Luis, but try to put on a front that confident we're going to get out here. But it gets darker and darker and darker, and so dark that I can't even see my hand in front of my own face. And Luis and I are sort of shuffling along on the path, feeling our way, trying to feel where the path is and where the brush is. I don't know about you, but we've probably all had those experiences in our life where we're sort of cruising along on autopilot and boom, you wake up and you realize, oh shit, I'm not in control. My mind has thought it was in control, but I'm not in control. And it was like this whole body experience of being awake all of a sudden, not to mention that I'm freezing at this point. And it's surreal to know exactly where you are. If I got up in an airplane at that moment, I could look down on that park. I knew the exact perimeters of where I was in time and space, but I had no idea how to get us out of there. And so constant fear thoughts started, arising. What if they lock the gates? What if we're here till morning? Oh my gosh, I'm responsible for Luis. He's coming here from Mexico. He's from a warm climate. All this fear. And thank God I knew enough to know that all of those automatic thoughts were not going to help my plight. In fact, they were going to make my plight worse. There would be no way in which I could connect with my intuition if I fed them more. And so, in an effort to be connected with the person that I did share that I was feeling scared. And so Luis and I kind of, grabbed arms together to try and help each other navigate the path. And he started praying the rosary, and I might have joined him, but I definitely remember just continually repeating a mantra of letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. So for another hour, nothing but letting go and trying to relax the best that I could in a time-pressured situation. And eventually we circled back around to a place that we had been an hour before. And this time I took a risk and I listened to my intuition. I had followed the sign every other time that said go this way. And my intuition was like, no, I think we need to go that way. And so I let go, and I did. And we eventually made our way out. I learned later that the sign was painted wrong. Thank you. But I learned so much in that experience of what it is like to surrender. And there was sweetness in that what seemed to be terrifying experience, terrifying in a controlled sort of way. It was Michigan. There were no mountain lions. There might have been, a raccoon that was upset with us, but we weren't going to die. But to be awake, to be that alive, amidst trying to not let the fears take over, it was a magical starry night. Being linked arm in arm with an old friend and needing to lean on each other to find our way through brought a sense of intimacy with someone who I wasn't even sure I was going to have a 30-minute conversation with, a couple hours before. So surrender is often about not focusing on where the problem is, but expanding and panning out to where the movement, where the beauty, where the mystery is, and letting go. I'd like to share some wisdom from across a few spiritual traditions today about surrender, from the Tao and also from a man named Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul and a book called The Surrender Experiment. How many of you are familiar or have read? Oh my goodness, do I have a treat in store for you. The Surrender Experiment. Read that one first. That's my recommendation. So Michael Singer is a man who in the 70s became fascinated with how this mind works. What is this, all this talking, this narrating that's happening in the mind? And he was getting a PhD in economics, and he decided to move out into the middle of the woods in Florida and meditate and practice lots of yogic austerities for hours on end. And this did bring him a great deal of calm and a lessening of the chatter in the mind. And he was very blessed to get to know several great yogis and to study with them. But there came a point in his austerities and his practice where he just couldn't get under why this darn monkey mind, as they sometimes call it, is so active. And he came to realize that one common denominator in that mind activity was resisting life. And so he made a commitment to surrender to the flow of life again and again and again. And his life has this magical trajectory. And I'll try to give you just a snapshot of it to help underscore this idea of surrendering. So as I said, he wants nothing more than to be this hippie yogi who's living in the middle of the woods and just meditating all day. And he's ready to quit this PhD program in economics. And the department chair asks him if he will help a man who's the president of a local community college get through the PhD program as well. Initially, what rises up in him is, why would I want to do that? I want to go be in the woods. I want to quit this program. But he remembers, I made this commitment to surrender to whatever life asks of me. And so he surrenders. And he gets this man through the program, and the man then proceeds to ask him to serve on faculty at the community college. And again, Michael's thinking, no, all I wanted to do was get back to the woods, go be by myself, and enjoy this meditation. And again, he remembers, I agreed to surrender to life's calling me. And so he says yes, with the caveat that he gets to teach in the social sciences. And so he teaches this class on understanding one's mind and talks about meditation and a lot of what he's been learning. And it becomes the most popular course on campus, and students are flooding in from all over. And he's having a blast teaching it. Never could he have imagined this had he just stayed in the woods. And so his life continues on, and he's in the woods, and again, living out there in solitude. Someone had helped him build a wonderful house, and he eventually builds a temple. And one day, a sheriff shows up on the property, and he's like, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna get busted here." And the sheriff says, "I'd really like that structure that you built. Could you make one for me?" And again, what rises up in Michael initially is, I'm just a yogi in the woods. I'm not a builder. And he remembers again his commitment to surrender. And so he says yes. Fast forward. He owns a construction company and is now building houses. And the construction company is called Built with Love. And he has employees, and people all around the area are asking him to build structures and homes. And he knows nothing about doing any of this. He just wants to meditate in the woods. And fast forward again. This is the era when the personal computer first comes out. And Michael finds himself fascinated with the personal computer. And, back in those days, DOS and programming, and, there were no programs that you could just buy. And somehow in his creative genius, he learns how to figure out how to do programming. And somewhere in the course of his connections, someone asks him, could you do a program that would help us with our medical billing? And again, no. And I agreed to surrender. And fast forward, he is eventually in charge of a multi-billion-dollar business in charge of programming. I won't tell you all the details. I'll let you read the book. And he is the employer for hundreds of people. This man who all he wants to do is be alone in the forest being a yogi. And did I mention that he now has several people who live on his property in a community when he wanted to live alone? And so you might be thinking, does this mean that I have to say yes to everything that everyone asks me? And how many of you have heard of Sounds True? Sounds True with Tammy Simon. So this is an audio program where Tammy Simon interviews spiritual teachers, and she interviews Michael, and she asks the best questions. And she says, well, if I said yes to something that everyone asked me to do, my schedule would be jam-packed. And Michael responds, it's not that you say yes to everything everyone's asking you. It's that you release anything that keeps you from being the core of who you truly are. That core of who you are that is merged with the flow of life. So if we were talking in Taoist terms, you would be the Tao. You would be in the flow of the way. And so when Michael is approached about life asking him to go in a certain direction, he's not attuned to the personality asking him or even perhaps the exact details of the situation. He's dropping everything that is ego. He's dropping the resistance. In yogic terms, he's dropping what are known as samskaras. And samskaras are those imprints inside of us that make us have aversions and desires that move toward things from our past. And those aren't bad things, but what we're trying to approach is this place within us that's unfettered, unbound, completely surrendered to love, to something greater and bigger than we can ever imagine. So to bring this into practical terms, how do we surrender when something is painful or not pretty? When my father was diagnosed with an illness that had a very short prognosis for life, I stood at the river and I took a leaf and I symbolically placed that leaf in the river and asked the river of life, which I know as God, the divine, called by many names, to hold him, to carry me, to carry our whole family. And those are the kind of surrender moments that aren't easy. And it's not that we don't have emotion, for if we resist the emotion, we're also just in ego again too. What we're doing is we're dropping anything that keeps us from surrendering to a greater love. There is a love more vast, more wise, more discerning, more compassionate than we could ever fathom with this mind. And so we're invited when life asks us to move in a particular direction or to respond to a particular direction, to see if we can soften and open and expand to that kind of love. And if you're inquisitive and a bit of a rebel like me, you'll say, well, what about situations like injustice? Am I supposed to just abdicate my power? Am I supposed to be passive? What about when it feels like love has failed? We think about the lives of people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King. There were so many times, if you've examined Martin Luther King's life, where he had to make decisions in the moment. Do we march today or do we not march today? People's lives were on the line. His decisions held people's very lives. He surrendered ego. He surrendered anything that might block him from trying to be a clear channel for decisive action, for how to create a bigger wholeness, a bigger vision in the fabric of life. When we are in part of life, I like to think of life as a tapestry. When we're in part of the tapestry, that just makes no sense. When there's like jagged edges and we can't pan out to see that there is this big tapestry where we're all woven together and somehow something is holding us, we can come together and bind together with each other to help each other to let go, to connect to this place where we are one. And that just isn't a new age term to throw around. That is a deep, deep mystical experience to practice every day of our lives. And so today, to end the talk, I'm going to invite us all into an experience of being held in surrender. I'd like each of you to think of something in your life or in our collective lives in this world that you find difficult to surrender to. Difficult to find the presence of love, the flow of love. And we're going to stand in a moment, if you're able, and we're going to walk a little bit like I did when I was in that darkened forest. And we're going to try to drop any fear, anything that we're carrying that drags us down, so that the natural Shakti, the energy of life, can rise up within us and can support us and hold us as a community together here in this fabric of life, this fabric of love that binds us together. So all who are willing, I'd ask you to rise and to find an open space here and in the aisles. And we're going to walk together in silence to the music. And I'd ask us all to just relax our bodies, to let anything that stands in the way of you merging with the divine within you as we surrender together. So all who are willing, please rise and find a place to walk. Feel your feet firmly planted on the ground. Perhaps wriggle your toes. Give your knees a little bend. Feel the ground beneath you. Close your eyes if it helps. Feel the center of gravity in your pelvis. Feel the earth rising up to meet you and the weight of your body releasing into the ground. With each exhale, allow yourself to drop any fear, any tension, any holding that's ready to be released. And any that needs to stay, just let it be and have the intention that you are coming to find the core of your body. And now, if you'd like, begin to move in any organic way around the room that helps you on your spirit walk as you surrender. Surrender yourself to the earth. Surrender to the vast holding of love. If your mind interrupts, return to your body. Return to your feet. Return to your breath. And begin finding your way back to your seat. Being mindful to continue in a state of surrender, surrender to love. And I'll just close with some words from Rumi. Looking at my life, I see that only love has been my soul's companion. From deep inside, my soul cries out, do not wait. Surrender for the sake of love.